Kimani was phenomenal. Kimani was a helper. She loved older music. She loved playing video games. She played basketball for Spring Elementary. She was highly intelligent. She loved the friends and family that she was allowed to be around. She was phenomenal. Like I said, she was like no other kid her age.
This case is one of the most horrific cases I ever heard. This is a 14-year-old that was murdered, raped, had her hands cut off, and her throat almost cut off.
I just wish that when I was down here last that I had just taken her to Indianapolis with me, so this would have never happened. A lot of things, you know, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but at the end of the day, I just really wish that whatever happened and whoever did this, y'all didn't have to do that to her.
One of our SWAT teams was working a dangerous individual who was wanted for a serious crime.
This is an absolute animal that came into our town. Our SWAT are the best of the best. We just send a message. You murder somebody, do not come to this town.
It's just devastating that that me and my family have to go through this.
Welcome into another edition of 11 Investigates Case Files. It's our streaming show where we take a deeper dive into stories and investigations that we're tracking. I'm lead investigator Brian Duggar.
And I'm investigative anchor Melissa Andrews. Today we're breaking down a case that has so many people calling for justice, and not just here in Toledo. It's the story of 13-year-old Kei'Mani Latigue, a young life gone too soon.
The investigation began on Tuesday, March 18th. Kimani's grandmother and legal guardian, Dorothy Latigue, tells 11 Investigates she came home from work early that morning and noticed things were out of place.
I usually get off of work at 9 o'clock. I made it home like 9:40 that morning. She wasn't here. There were things in the floor that should not have been. That's what caused the alarm. So I called the school to speak with her. I asked them, could I speak with her? And then they did. They contacted the principal, her teacher, and the gym teacher, and all three of those guys said that she was not there.
That's when she called police. By Friday, March 21st, the community came together to search for Kimani. That effort included her mother, Tiara Caston, who lives in Cleveland.
I saved her on the 15th. Her dad brought her down to my house, and apparently my mother gave him permission. And honestly, it was just me loving on my kid. You know, we played video games. We played, we talk mess. You know, that's what we do. We roast each other, all types of stuff, but it's all love.
This is breaking me. I've been falling the apart since I found out. I've legitimately been on social media since the minute I found out, spreading awareness, sending out flyers, contact information, anything to get my baby home. I have not slept in 3 days. I have not ate in 3 days.
Police tracked phone records, reviewed surveillance footage, and talked to witnesses. That led them to a man identified as Kimani's father, 33-year-old Darnell Jones. Detectives believed he was the last person with her. TPD says Jones provided inconsistent statements. By Sunday, March 23rd, he was charged with abduction. An arrest warrant was issued.
This man has been to my house several times. He usually takes her for weekends to his house to visit with him and his other children. And I feel deceived. Like, you played for so long in my face like you was her dad, like you really had her best interests at heart. But where is she?
The next day, Monday, March 24th, police found Kimani's body in a burned-out house on Miami Street in East Toledo. The Lucas County Coroner's Office determined she suffered multiple deep cuts to her neck, and an autopsy determined her death a homicide. Jones was charged with murder.
We are working the case as fast as we can. as I said before, I think we're in a really good place investigatively, and I think as soon as we can button everything up and run down every lead, the last thing we want to do is be premature in our charges or premature in saying, this is the only suspect we have, we're good. We don't like to do that. We like to make sure we investigate everything out there, so when we do take this to trial, there is no room for doubt.
Authorities tracked their suspect to Columbus, where body cam video showed Jones reaching for a gun. Then, an officer shot him multiple times.
Show me your hands right now. Pull your hand out of your... I swear to God, pull your...
Shots fired! Shots fired! This was an individual wanted for homicide out of Toledo. I called my union counterpart in Toledo. I said, hey, good news, we have your guy. Your guy committed a murder, chose to fled to our town. I'll tell you right now, the wrong town to come to if you murder somebody. Our SWAT team will go out looking for you. This case is one of the most horrific cases I ever heard. This is a 14-year-old that was murdered, raped, had her hands cut off, and her throat almost cut off. This is an absolute animal that came into our town.
Jones survived and was hospitalized in Columbus. He remained there through Wednesday, April 9th, when he was moved to the Franklin County Jail awaiting arraignment the following morning.
I feel hurt. I've lost somebody in the city of Toledo that's been so dear, is so dear to me. And I feel like she kind of became part of Toledo.
The case has drawn the attention of so many people here in the Toledo community and even outside. There are passionate conversations and pleas for justice across social media, as well as criticism of Lucas County Children's Services.
I want to hear from CSB. We all do. What happened? What was the missing link? Where was the disconnect?
This is a concern to us here at Lucas County, because I want to be clear. We have no record of any call from a mandated reporter or community member for an entire year prior to her murder. We have no record of anyone from Toledo Public Schools ever calling us with respect to Kimani. We have no record of anyone calling us ever with concerns about Darnell Jones.
By March 27th, the Lucas County Commissioners formed a task force to look into the agency. The goal? To identify any shortcomings, but not investigate how Children's Services handled Kei'Mani's case.
So the task force is not to examine a single case. Our shared goal is broader to ensure that every child and every family in Lucas County receives the protection and the care they deserve. Nothing can be more important. I look forward to working with the community's volunteer who will be a part of this process.
Just look at our history when we've done task force before. Look at TARDA. We committed to make a change, to a substantial change. Health Department, they needed change, we made change. I'll stand on our record of not just talking. Nobody here is just, we're not going to spend 9 months analyzing a problem, you know. We know it, we're going to know what the problem is, then we're going to go after it. I can't make any commitments today of what that looks like because nobody knows. But it goes where it goes, it's outside in, and we're going to get started.
Lucas County Children's Services has since sent out a news release. It's explained it can't release some information because of privacy laws, and other facts could create challenges for prosecutors as Kei'Mani's alleged killer faces trial.
Because the understandable facts and the understandable rationale, we're not able to do that right now. But yeah, I do think that once this prosecution is over, and with the help of the task force, I think we'll be able to release our files and let the people judge how we responded prior to Kimani's death.
The agency spoke publicly during a news conference on Tuesday, April 8th. Executive Director Randy Muth revealed a report by Kei'Mani's former teacher was investigated, along with another incident of excessive physical discipline by Kei'Mani's grandmother. Those happened in December of 2023 and March of 2024, and both situations ended without sufficient evidence to warrant removing Kei'Mani from the home.
We determined that the placement there was appropriate. All the basic needs of the child were being met. She was getting all of her sustenance, her housing conditions were fine, her school and medical conditions were being met.
All right, Brian, so a ton to unpack here. This case is still in the very early stages. The dad is still in the hospital. We heard that he was in jail finally in Columbus.
Right. Yeah, that's one reason we kind of wanted to look at this. You know, I've been here, Mel, since 1998. I've been in Toledo since 1998, and it's obviously the Blade for 20 years. And I don't remember a case that has created this much conversation in the community. And a lot of that conversation, you know, was rumors and I mean, stuff that simply wasn't true. So we thought it'd be interesting to have this, you know, talk today so we could kind of walk people through how we found out about things and what we did to kind of parse out what was true and what wasn't.
Well, there's a lot more people calling themselves reporters out there now. As you saw out at the home the other day, people can pick up a phone and they can type out whatever rumor they want, and we're here to tell you what has been confirmed and what is fact here on Case Files today. So you're really familiar with this. Unfortunately, I was out of town when all this happened, so I'm kind of coming into it as anyone who would be viewing the case doesn't really know a lot about it, but unfortunately what we have here is a sweet young girl. And there's been a lot made about who was there for her in her life, how she ended up in this position, and this involves some key players and developmental figures in any child's life. You're talking mother, grandmother, and father.
Yeah, and what we found out in looking into this case is that there's family dynamics at play here, where a lot of the family, they do not like each other. The mother and the grandmother, they were...
Which are mother and daughter.
Yes, I mean, they're openly hostile, particularly the mother toward the grandmother. And, you know, but we found out about this case very early on. A lot of times Toledo police will give us a little flyer, so-and-so's missing. For example, we had recently an older man that was missing. We put it in the newscast. People looked for him. We found out today that he's been found safe. So that's what happens a lot of times. We get these flyers. People look for them, they eventually come back, you know, whether they're runaways or whatever. And that's what happened with Kimani. We got a flyer, but then I had somebody that was involved with me in a different story that I did. Kimani was his wife's niece, and he said, could you get together with the grandmother and do a story? But because this isn't like her. She's nearly a straight A student. She'd never run away from home. She wasn't unhappy, and this just isn't like her. So what we did set up an interview with the mother early on.
The mother, the grandmother?
The grandmother, I'm sorry. So the grandmother very early on, and I want to show a clip from that.
And did the grandmother have custody of Kimani?
Yeah, the grandmother was the guardian of Kimani, and we're not exactly sure why. We know that she had been with several, Kimani had been with several different relatives, guardians in her lifetime, but over the past year, the grandmother had been the guardian for her. But we had this clip with the grandmother, which I want to show right now, and then afterwards, I think we're actually going to have another clip with the mother, because at some point we started having search parties around the community. So we're going to have back-to-back clips when we talk to the grandmother and then when we talk to the mother.
The fact that she left without telling anybody where she was going, I was under the impression that she was supposed to have been at school because I usually get here right after she leaves for school. And she wasn't here, but I called the school and they said that she wasn't there. So I went to the school just to, I guess, really get the stamp of approval for that. And they stated the same thing, she was not there. And so me and her dad started looking for her.
It would be the world to me. Like this, I hate to, I don't like cursing, but honestly, this is breaking me. I've been falling the apart since I found out. I've legitimately been on social media since the minute I found out, spreading awareness, sending out flyers, contact information, anything to get my baby home. I have not slept in 3 days. I have not ate in 3 days. I have never had a seizure before in my life, sir, and I've had 3 within the past couple days. This is tearing me the up. If my baby don't make it home, I will never be okay again. And I hate to say that because I have other kids.
So what was really interesting about that conversation with the grandmother, at the end of it there, you heard her say, we called her father. And then after that, she said her father's girlfriend actually created these flyers for Kimani, which you saw pasted around town. And that's interesting because later on when Lucas County Children's Services come in, they say when they went into the house, there was never a mention of the father. So I had just noticed this clip yesterday when we were looking through it, and I don't think we ever reported it, but Dorothy called the father very early on. And what we know now is that the father is actually the suspect in Kimani's murder. So he was helping create the, put these flyers together. He was in the search party. So,
and we still don't even know why he allegedly did this, and hopefully that'll come out. I mean, it's just, and we heard the Fraternal Order of Police guy down there in Columbus talk about the condition that Kimani was in, and I think that grabbed a lot of attention and was horrific, of course, and to do this to your own child. Do we know the extent of the relationship between Kimani and her mother, who lives in Cleveland, right?
Yeah, she was in Cleveland. We know that she was paying child support for Kimani.
She was paying child support to Dorothy, the grandmother.
She was. But as far as the dynamics, I mean, we were out at Miami Street. I was out at Miami Street, when they found Kimani's body, and I was talking to her mother, and the grandmother was off to the side, and they were yelling at the grandmother a lot. There's not love between the daughter and the grandmother in this case. So.
And we don't know why, because sometimes that can be, and this is just speaking generally from our experience covering stories. In some cases, CSB could come in, or a judge can come in and just say, hey, mom, you're not living the way you need to live to support this child. Custody goes to the grandma. Then a mother could be upset about that. We don't know if that was the case here.
Yeah, we know Tiara had run into some legal issues at some point, which she had admitted, but she seemingly seems to be back on her feet now and doing well. But I think when around the time Kimani was born, there was definitely something going on at that point. So, shortly after we talked to the grandmother and the mother there, we had come in some morning, and there was another media report that said there had been a body found on Miami Street. And that is supposedly related to the Kimani case. So we immediately reached out to the police department, and interestingly, the police department said, their PIO had said, well, I don't know. I don't have any information on that right now, so let me get back to you. And eventually, we got in touch with the grandmother, and she's like, I can't talk right now. They found Kimani over on Miami Street.
And this is really where a lot of people had gathered, and sometimes they do. We've seen this many, many, many times here in Toledo. Someone is found dead or someone shot at a home, and people will gather there. And what happened there, though? Because from my understanding, there were a lot of people with cameras. There was the yelling at Dorothy, the grandmother, as the police are inside this house trying to figure out who this body is.
Yeah, it really was unnerving and a little surreal, but when we were there, there may have been between 50 and 100 people, and 25 to 50 of those people had their phones up in the air doing like live
Facebook
wherever
Live.
they do it, like Facebook Lives or whatever. It was just a weird thing to see, all these phones being held up, as the police. And we could see the detectives on the top floor of Miami Street. That's where her body was found. You could see them through the windows because it's like a burned out building, and you could see them working, setting up the lights, taking pictures. But what we didn't know, and we're actually going to have a clip about this too, is that the mother, she was kind of in the front of this crowd. The grandmother is off to the side. They're kind of trying to keep her out of the way. And the mother was getting very agitated, and she was very angry that the police weren't letting her know, is this my daughter? I just want to know that. So we actually have a clip of talking to the mother that day.
I just want to know if it's my baby. They still not telling me nothing. It takes nothing. It's nothing to take a picture. It's nothing to, you know what I'm saying, let me know when the coroner's bringing her out so I can see if that's indeed my baby. Y'all not saying nothing. And y'all can tell if it's a grown-ass woman or if it's a little kid. My daughter tall, but she still has the body of a child. You know the difference.
So what are they telling you?
They're not telling me nothing. They ain't told me nothing. Not a word. Then they talking about it might be days before I be able to identify my child. Like, no.
What have you been told up until this point?
Yeah, so what ended up happening here, probably within an hour or so after that, you know, the body was removed from the house. You know, I think somebody gave us a heads up that the body's coming down, and they took the family off to the side, and we saw the police talking to them, and at some point Tiara comes kind of back up the road, and she falls to her knees, and she starts crying. So,
well, police, you know, they have to preserve evidence.
Absolutely.
A coroner is the only one who can come in and declare somebody dead, so they've got to wait for that person to get there. But so there's an arrest warrant for the dad issued on 3/23, March 23rd. Body is found on the 24th. So at this point, is it public knowledge that the dad is wanted for well, at this, okay, so he was wanted before the body was found. Now it's a murder, okay,
Right.
It's a homicide. So is it known at the time when the body is found that Darnell, the dad, is the main suspect here?
Absolutely. So the day before, he was charged with a felony charge of abduction from a residence.
Right.
And there was something in the arrest warrant about surveillance video, phone records, and I know somebody who was in that house at various times, and he had told me—
In the Miami house?
Not in the Miami house, in the Elm Street house, which is where Kimani lived.
Okay.
And he had told me, this was before Darnell had even been charged, and he said, look, there's a Ring doorbell, there's cameras on the house, so they would have seen who came to get her. So Darnell's story that he later told to media was that Kimani called me around midnight, said guys were trying to break into the house. I went over there and sat outside the house with my cousin. We stayed till about 12:30, 1 o'clock, and then we left. But
So trying to explain why you might see him on the camera,
yes,
I guess?
Yes,
Okay.
but I mean, we can only speculate at this point, but we do know that there was surveillance on that house, and you would have to speculate that they must have seen him either approaching the door, maybe taking Kimani from the house. So we knew before her body was even found that he was certainly a suspect in her kidnapping. And then when her body was found, he became the main suspect in the murder, and he was quickly charged with murder.
Do we know yet how police identified that Miami house? Maybe they took his cell phone and drew a circle around Miami Street house. Is that how they found out to look there for her?
we know that they got some sort of tip. The police got a tip about that house, and this house, it had caught on fire, I think like 5 years ago.
It was
completely
dilapidated.
burned out. Nobody was living there. The person that actually owns it is living in New Jersey. He planned on raising it and turning it into a parking lot. So we know that there was a tip that brought them to Miami Street. We don't know who that tipster was. But, you know, after this happened, after, after the body was found, one of our reporters, Silver Barker, who we actually have joining us here, she actually had this exclusive interview with the grandmother where she talked about some really big questions that a lot of people had about the family. And I think we have Silver here with us.
Hey, Silver, you were able to...
Hi, Mel. Hi.
Hey, she's in Columbus, and we're going to get to that in a minute. There was actually a hearing for Darnell Jones today, and we're going to get to that in a bit. But you really were the reporter that did so much of this work here on this case. There's been a lot of talk about, like we were saying, the relationships with the adults that Kimani had in her life, the people who are supposed to be taking care of her. And you talked to the grandma, Dorothy, who had custody of her. Tell me about this false arrest. I have never heard about anything like this happening, or Toledo police or any police agencies participating in something like this. Fill us in what happened from what Dorothy told you in this interview.
Yeah, absolutely, Mel. Well, obviously, I wanted to ask this question because a lot of videos circulated online of, Dorothy being arrested, or it was believed to be that she was arrested. So I asked her in the interview, I said, hey, there's video and showing that you were arrested, but police told us that was not the case. So what happened? And she explained to me that after the body was found and, the relationship that you guys mentioned earlier between the mom, Tiara, and Dorothy, there was a lot of tension between family members, friends, and people who were also there on the scene of the body being found. And a lot of people were yelling at her, saying they were going to do things to her. She told me, this is what she says, so she felt unsafe, and so she decided she wanted to be cuffed to make it look like she was being arrested, is what she told us.
Yeah, Silver, actually, let's take a moment here and actually play that clip of her talking about this fake arrest.
Well, I was called and told that there was a mob of people in front of my house. They were angry. It was more or less the people that were here earlier waiting to see if it was Kimani that was in the home. And basically some people from the neighborhood had contacted me and said that there was a mob in front of my house and they were talking about what they were going to do to me once I came home. So the police, the detective said that she would have a unit come out and help me get my things and more or less escort me off the property. I asked to be handcuffed just so they can get the fuck away from my property.
Yeah, and Silver, this is really interesting because we were seeing all these social media videos, and it was clear that she was being led from the house in handcuffs. There was a large police presence there. There was a large community presence there where they were shouting at her, and it looked like she was being arrested. And we actually reached out to, you actually reached out to the police department, and we were trying to get clarification. Was she arrested? What was going on? And we kind of got a couple different answers from the police about what was happening. So that was just a really weird situation. I don't know if you have anything more you want to say about how the police kind of explained that away.
Yeah, I mean, we had been told that it was a ruse, and we questioned, is that even allowed? Because like you said, I've never seen anything working in my time as a journalist either of someone being arrested or requesting to be arrested. So we were told it was a ruse. We were also told it was for her own safety. So like you said, we were told multiple things, and we haven't yet figured out what was the case, but we were told the same from the grandmother, is for her safety.
Did you get the impression that she wanted to be handcuffed so she wouldn't go after these people who were harassing her? Or did you get the impression that she wanted people off her back and to think that maybe she was in the custody of police? And then if that was the case, didn't she realize that it would eventually be found out that she wasn't arrested and that the same pressure would come back to her?
Well, that's a good point, Mel. I mean, I think, in my opinion, I believe that it was to get everyone, like she said, off her back, she said, because she says there was a lot of people yelling at her, like saying they were going to do things to her, she says. So I think it was more to make it look like she did get arrested so people would stop saying, you know, she deserves this, she deserves that. And I think that's the reason she requested to be handcuffed. It seemed like we were having that interview and she was talking to me.
Have you ever heard of anything like this?
I had not, and for a moment there, I'm like, is this even ethical? Are the police allowed to do this?
I had the same question.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I guess they are.
Well,
but Silver, this really was a remarkable interview, and it's a very difficult interview. So at this point, you're talking to a grandmother who a lot of the community is accusing her of being involved somehow.
Well, so that's my question. At this time, when people are coming out of the grandmother and harassing her and you're interviewing her, is the information from CSB known?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Yeah, did we know anything about CSB? Were the calls to hear more from Children's Services out there yet? At the time that you're talking to the grandma and all these people are coming out against the grandma, did we know anything from Children's Services yet?
So no, we did not know anything from Children's Services. Like I said, there was a lot of things said online and people mentioning things. So we were wondering, well, let's ask the question. So at that time in the interview, that's why I did ask the grandmother, well, hey, have you ever been looked into by Child Protective Services? And that's when she admitted that she was looked into twice. And schools had reported, and that's when we, spoke with a teacher who spoke out from Bennett Venture Academy. So, but before that, we didn't know. So I think that interview there uncovered that and revealed that she had to talk about, Child Protective Services had to tell her how to properly discipline a child.
Right, and we actually have that soundbite, so let's play that right now, and then we can talk about it.
She was not abused. Yes, she was chastised whenever she was wrong or did things wrong. Other than that, she was not abused. She was not just whooped for no reason or just because I felt like it. I've went through this twice because the school system had contacted CSB on her behalf when she went to Bennett Academy. And they came in, they did a case study and closed it. They've stated there's a way to chastise children without physically harming them, and you need to whoop them on their behind, nowhere else. So, okay, with that in mind, I knew that. So she didn't have like bruises all over.
I mean, that really was, credit to you for even asking her that question, because that was a very uncomfortable question. And it really was fascinating that she actually came out and said, yeah, they taught me, or they showed me the proper way to discipline my child. I mean, I did not think there was a proper way. I just assumed you could not hit your child. But she said, yeah, they showed me with the open hand, and you hit them where you're not going to leave a mark. What did you think when she said that?
I found it very interesting in that during that time in that interview, Brian, I really did not expect her to open up and admit that and talk about that past. I mean, that opened a pathway, of course, for us to now then reach out to Child Protective Services and see there in Lucas County. So I didn't think that she would say that in the interview. So when she did, that kind of gave me a way to keep asking more questions. And like you said, it wasn't easy asking those questions, I'll be honest, getting very into the exactly what all happened and really just trying to understand exactly what she's saying and getting further behind, just what was reported previously or what we're finding out from officials. So it was a little bit of a harder interview, but again, I think those are important and crucial to information we're learning.
Yeah, and Silver, you actually got other really interesting information. This is how we found out that Darnell was down in Columbus and that he'd been shot, right? The grandmother told you this.
Yeah, the grandmother, I asked her anytime, I said, well, do you know where Darnell Jones is right now? Because at that time of the interview, we did not know yet just exactly what was happening with Darnell Jones. Yeah.
Well, I have a question too for both of you. I mean, now we've talked about all of the adult caregivers in her life. We've talked about children's services. Did they fail Kimani? Is that a part of the conversation? I mean, ultimately, her dad ended up being the one to come in and allegedly kill her, didn't end up really having anything to do with the grandmother, but then you have the mother saying, should the grandmother have let her go with him? I mean, from what we know now, and we do have sound from Lucas County Children's Services, but did they bear any responsibility here? Are we holding them accountable in any way, and do we need to?
I mean, the community is certainly asking those questions. I mean, the one thing that they said is that we'd been to the house 2 times. The last time was about a year before Kimani disappeared and was killed. And interestingly, the grandmother in that conversation with Silver said, well, they were here 7 months ago. So I don't know whether she just got her time frame kind of screwed up there, but that was interesting. And during those visits, they said nobody ever mentioned Darnell Jones. Nobody ever mentioned a father. Nobody had any idea who the father was, which is interesting because, again, when you saw that first interview with Dorothy at the beginning of the show, she mentioned she immediately called the father. So what we don't know is whether the father came into Kimani's life within the past year, after the time that Lucas County Children's Services got involved. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of questions, and that's why there's a task force formed, and they're going to look into it.
And the 2 instances that were brought forth to Lucas County Children's Services, who did they find responsible for that? Dorothy?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a couple different teachers maybe that had reached out, or they had got to multiple reports that Kimani was seen with like bruises, and yeah, I mean, she was clearly living with Dorothy at that point. Now, they did ask Kimani, do you feel safe in the home? And she said, I do, on both cases. And, you know, I mean, Children's Services can't take Kimani out of that home, but they can ask a court to take her out.
It's also a hard question to ask a 14-year-old who may be being abused. Do you feel comfortable there? You know, that child could be scared of any retribution in the home or anywhere else. So, you know, I want to bring in Silver again. Silver, do you know, did they talk about the ways in which they investigated these reports? I would hate to think that it was just, hey, do you feel comfortable in your home? A child could certainly just give the answer that'll keep them in the least amount of trouble. We don't know if that was the case. So did they tell you exactly how they investigated these reports?
So I'm not exactly sure just how they investigated these reports. I know that they talked to Kimani, as we previously reported in the past, but I'm not exactly sure what questions or what they asked. There's some things that they said can't be revealed as well, but I do want to talk a little bit about the father thing that I think is interesting, of how LCCS mentioned that there was no father, Darnell Jones mentioned. You know, I think trying to figure out exactly when did he come into her life, I think that's critical and key and important. And even when I asked the mother, she told me that was the biological father, but the grandmother says she was told by the mother that wasn't. So I think that's a thing that's interesting as well to know. But as far as in what I've learned from LCCS, you know, we've had other reporters as well who've been working on that and keeping in touch with that part. But we know that they've had conversations with Kimani, but not the exact details as to what those conversations look like.
The other thing, Brian, is it's very, very rare for us to be able to get anything out of Lucas County Children's Services, similar to a school system, you know, which can cite FERPA, federal protection laws. People can cite HIPAA. It's very difficult to get anything out about these cases or any claims into Lucas County Children's Services. So why do you think that they did agree to speak to the media about this? You feel like they felt they had to?
I mean, yeah.
Because of the outrage?
You're right, because juvenile records, we can never get juvenile
Especially
records.
about child abuse.
Absolutely. So I think there is such a tremendous community outcry. There were a lot of rumors going around, and there were a lot of people, frankly, that were accusing Dorothy of many different things. And I think, you know, just not only for her safety, but for community's well-being, they kind of needed to get out there and try to appear to be transparent, or be as transparent as they could be.
Do you think we can put a pin in this, or do you think there's still more questions to be answered from Lucas County Children's Services?
I think there's going to be a investigation, and they're going to hopefully.
You think like an internal investigation there will be?
Yeah, I mean, I know
because this task force has explicitly said its purpose is not to investigate this case. So do you think there will be some sort of an internal investigation or otherwise into Children's Services and this case specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that 100%, but I would have to think that they're looking at. They're certainly looking at the way they handle similar situations like this going forward.
And I just heard from our producer Josh that Randy Muth, who is the executive director, did ask the state to investigate. Is that to your knowledge
I mean,
as well?
that's my understanding, that the state is going to be involved. And one of the reasons, you know, I had asked one of the reporters, I said, look, when you're at this news conference, ask them if they ever asked the court to remove Kimani from the house. And, you know, I mean, he was very dismissive and said, well, no, we didn't, and the court never would have done that. But one of the things I was thinking in my mind is like, look, we want him to say, did you or didn't you? Because if the state comes back and they find fault in their investigation and something should have been done, you know, we now have him on camera saying, look, we did not ask them to take her out of the house.
One of the things, and we've had, you know, this kind of a story affects everyone. Even in our newsroom, we talk about this little girl, Kimani, and we talk about the questions we all have as parents. And we've also done a lot of stories over the years about fostering, just in many cases in general. And one of the questions that a couple of us as parents raised during all this is, you know, there's a very big push always to keep a child with a blood relative should their parent not be able to care for them. But when does that go too far? When does a child do better with someone who may be a stranger but is loving and caring? And we're not saying that Dorothy wasn't that way. We don't know that. But I think that has to be a part of the conversation too. If there is an investigation, is, you know, when is it better for the child to be with this person versus this person who may just happen to be a blood relative?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very fair question because, look, again, like you said, we don't know what Dorothy and Kimani's relationship was like. I mean, we know what we've heard, but we don't know 100%. But there are certainly people accusing her of things, and, you know, if they are true, again, we don't know that they are, but yes, could somebody else have cared for her better?
Yeah.
You never know.
Let's bring in Silver again. She's got some reports to do today, again, more on this. But Silver, and then we can circle back. I think it's okay to circle back. There was a hearing this morning for Darnell. That's why you're in Columbus today. Tell us what happened. Is he still in the hospital? Because I know we had heard that he had maybe gone to jail at this point. Tell us the latest that you know here as of April 10th.
Yeah. So we're not sure if he is still in the hospital right now. Multiple sources at this time have told me that he is still healing from his injuries. That's why he actually didn't appear today in court for the arraignment. We're still learning to work more details of exactly why, but like I mentioned earlier, multiple sources say he's still healing and they want him to heal up a little bit more before he is in court to face his charges. They also said that they're going to give 15 days for him for Lucas County to pick him up from Franklin County Court here and give him 15 days to be charged over there in Lucas County. They're going to pick him up within those 15 days, like I mentioned, and charge him over there with his, of course, murder charge and the abduction charge. Now, keep in mind, he still has a felonious assault charge here in Columbus that he has to face, but Franklin County says they want Lucas County to pick him up first within those 15 days.
All right.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and that's been a question of many people, it's like, where is he going to be tried first? Is he going to be tried in Columbus, or is he going to be tried in Lucas County. And our belief, and I think based off what you've just said too, is that they're probably going to try the more serious charge, the murder charge,
That makes sense. That makes
in
sense.
Lucas County.
And allow the people here to move on with their lives, the grandmother, Dorothy, and mom.
Yeah, but I actually wonder if we can go back, and I know we saw this previously, but the actual body cam of when Darnell was actually caught by police and he ended up getting shot.
Come here, man.
Don't do it.
What's your name?
Just kill me.
Dude, show me your fucking hands right now.
Me, bro.
Pull your fucking hand out of your. I swear to God, pull your.
Shots fired. Shots fired. Dennis in a second. Get medics, go.
Don't fucking move.
Don't move. All right, suspects down. All you guys are okay.
Don't move. He's got 33 right there.
33 in his hand.
Talk about this a little bit.
Walkie-talkie, but there's 33s right here. Don't you move or you're going to get shot, okay? All right? Got it. Yep. That's him. Somebody get
on the main air. Get us some medics.
I'm working on it.
All right, on your belly. All right. I got cuffs. There you go. Thank you, brother. We'll get you help, okay?
So did the Columbus police know who they were dealing with at this point? Just bring us up to what happened here.
Yeah, they did know, and I think what we learned is that Columbus was actually kind of staking him out for a couple of days. They knew that he had possibly fled to Columbus, and one of his addresses, when we do background searches on him, is actually in Columbus. It wasn't this location, but we know that he had ties to Columbus, so they were watching him for a couple days, and he looks much different than he did in Toledo. He shaved his head, but a couple interesting things about this cam is that when the police approached him, you know, he said, "Go ahead and kill me." And then later on, when he is down and they're working on him, you know, he says, "I can't feel my legs," but he's like, "Just let me die." And a police officer says to him, like, "Look, man, it's never as bad as you think it is." And Darnell responds, "Yeah, it's bad." So at that point, hearing him say these things, I mean, it certainly doesn't sound like an innocent man, but I mean, I guess we'll find out what the court system says.
And Kimani's body was found on the 24th. When did this shooting happen?
I don't remember, but I think it was the day after.
Day after. So her body had already been found, and he was aware of what condition, allegedly, if he did this, that she was left in.
Yeah, because, and again, we were wondering what exactly happened to Kei'Mani, and we don't know exactly. I mean, you can certainly speculate when a young girl is taken and then she shows up in an abandoned house and killed. But, you know, they had a Columbus union official who came out, and we saw that at the very beginning, but he said this was a most horrific crime. You know, her hands were cut off, her head was nearly cut off, she'd been raped, and I mean, this was beyond anything that we were even speculating.
Comprehend, yeah.
And it was very surprising that somebody in a different city was the one to reveal this information.
Right, it sure was. You know, the memorial is probably bigger than any I've ever seen here. And I was talking to Megan Hartnett. We've had her on the show before. She went out and covered the memorial at one point, and there were elderly people coming by. There were all kinds of people. This is in its infancy stages, to be honest with you. This is some early video of it, but you know, what do you think it is, Brian, about this case that has brought so many people out there? I mean, certainly you can speculate that it's the thought of kind of this little girl who, by all accounts, was a wonderful person. And was she just caught up in a circle of people who could have and should have done more for her? Was it that her father is accused of doing this to her? What is it, do you think, about Kimani in this story that has touched so many people?
Yeah, and I've asked myself that question a lot. I think the big thing is that this was a 13-year-old girl. She's very sweet looking. She's very beautiful, and her body is found in an abandoned, burned out house, and her father is charged with killing her. I mean, it really doesn't get any more horrific than that. And I think it's also that the whole community feels like they have a stake in this, because there were so many people at the crime scene, you know, when she was found. So many people having their little Facebook Lives and telling stories online and spreading rumors, and there's so many online detectives that so many people in the community feel like they have a stake in this story, and they knew her because so much information is being released. And honestly, sometimes we don't see family members that have been this open as Dorothy and Tiara, and you know, the father at some point even talked to the media. So yeah, you add all of this together, and it was Kimani's birthday on the Friday after she was found. I think she was found on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and her 14th birthday was that Friday. So this really, I mean, we just saw this memorial just swell with so many balloons and happy birthday things.
I just, when I look at those pictures too, I think of her classmates and her teachers. And when I think of being a teacher, and we do have a report from Lucas County Children's Services saying that a teacher reported to them, you know, there has to be a feeling, there's her desk at her school, that's just so heartbreaking. There has to be a feeling as a teacher, you know, almost like a guilt. You know, I think in a lot of these cases, you go home to your family at the end of the day, you're certainly bound by kind of staying in the classroom. You can make a report, but really what more can you do?
Yeah,
and now they've lost this little girl.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the whole thing why people care so much, is that so many people feel like we failed her.
Yeah.
Whether it's county officials, whether it's children's services, whether it's teachers, whether it's community members that said, hey, I knew that family.
Yep.
We should have done something.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've got the arraignment here in Columbus. 15 days within that period, Darnell Jones is supposed to be brought back to Toledo to face these murder charges. What else are we looking ahead? Where else do we need to button things up here?
I mean, that's going to be the big thing. I mean, you know, at some point, within 15 days, it doesn't have to be 15 days, he could show up in Toledo tomorrow.
Right.
Or, you know, the day after. So when's he going to appear in court? Is he going to take a plea deal? Will there be...
It's interesting what he said on that body cam, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I mean, it is very interesting. And, you know, and I think it's fair to ask the question, is he going to be able to be tried in Lucas County? I mean, how many people in Lucas County haven't heard about this? How many people haven't already come up with an opinion?
You can hear about it. That doesn't preclude you from serving on a jury. The question is whether or not you can set that aside and deliver a fair and impartial verdict.
Right. And for the last 2 weeks, you know, whether he's guilty or he's innocent, everybody's been perceiving him as guilty because this is the man, this is the father, this is the one suspected of doing this. And you don't really hear, a lot of times when we have a case, it's like, well, I don't know whether he's really guilty. Let's see what the jury says. We're not hearing that from members of the community. They're like, you know, I hope this guy gets justice in jail, and, you know, I can't believe he did this. So again,
well, Lucas County's big. I'm gonna push back on you a little bit there and say that I think we can get there with a jury, but we've got a long way to go before then.
Yeah.
Kimani's we've got a public, her private funeral services begin tonight. She's got a public viewing here tomorrow. I imagine thousands of people could show up to this.
Yeah, and we don't really know what it's going to look like. We know it's going to be at the YMCA and it's going to be a walk-through memorial. We don't know whether her casket will be there. We don't know whether an urn will be there. We don't know whether family members are going to be there. So we really don't know what to expect.
Yeah, I think more to come on this. Like we said, there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. There's a state investigation apparently going on now regarding this case in Child Protective Services, and then we've got a whole host of hearings that come up, but it'll be interesting to watch. Thank you for trusting us here in our community to handle this case. I know it's been taxing emotionally on you watching it. It has been delivering it, I know, for our team. We have a lot of, Silver is just starting out in her career, and this is her first big case, and I think about her often and how she's handling and reporting on this, because it's just been such a tragedy, and she'll remember this case, and I think so many people here in Lucas County will.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Silver yesterday, and I said, man, you had such a big case very early in your career, and this is going to be something 20 years down the road you're going to talk about. Man, I had this case with a 13-year-old girl 20 years ago.
And it can really shape you and how you approach these types of things, because it's tragic and it's sensitive, and it can really affect you.
Yeah. And let's just say this, Mel, we don't know that this story is over. We know that Darnell Jones, Ogletree, he has been charged with her murder. But the police will certainly tell you this investigation is not over.
Yeah.
We don't know if other people were involved, because there are those questions. How does he get a 13-year-old girl up to the second floor of a burned out house on Miami Street? Did he have help?
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll be looking into that and many more things here with this case. Thanks so much for joining us here on Case Files. We'll see you next week.